What do number 1, 2, and 3 of the World Cube Association ranking have in common? That's right, they all use the CFOP method. In fact, all of the records ever broken are done using the CFOP method, except for one solve. But before we get there, we need to go a bit back in time. Erno Rubik invented the Rubik's Cube in 1974 as a teaching tool for explaining three-dimensional geometry. He ended up creating something so difficult that it took almost a month to solve it himself. But to explain how he first solved it, we need to take a look at what the Rubik's Cube really is. The Rubik's Cube consists of 26 pieces, 20 of which you need to solve. There are 6 center pieces which always stay in place, so we can't really solve them. Instead, they show which color needs to go on each side of the cube. Then we have 12 edge pieces which have 2 colors and go in between 2 center pieces. And finally 8 corner pieces which have 3 colors and go in between 3 edge pieces. So the way Erno solved it is he just looked at the types of different pieces and he first solved the corners and afterwards the edge pieces. And little did he know that a few years later the cube would get sold as a toy and become one of the best-selling toys ever. And after hundreds of millions of people tried to solve one, in 1982 the first World Championships ever was organized, where a guy named Minz Vora got the first official world record of 22.95 seconds, done using the same type of method where he would first solve the corners and then move on to the edges. But around the same time, people started to notice that this isn't the most effective way to solve the Rubik's Cube. Someone figured out that you can just peel off the stickers. Bruh. Instead of looking at the different pieces that need to get solved, people looked at the Rubik's Cube as consisting of 3 layers. That's why my beginner videos use the same method where we would solve the cross, then the first layer, the second layer, and finally the last layer. But to get to the most popular speed cubing method, we have to take this one step further. And perhaps the name of the method can give us a step in the right direction. CFOP, Cubing Fundamentals Optimized for Pizza. Nah, I'm just kidding guys. It actually stands for the 4 different steps you do during this method, which are cross, first 2 layers, orientation of the last layer, and finally permutation of the last layer. Whoa. What does this stuff even mean? The CFOP method starts off in the same way as the beginner method, by creating a cross, usually done on the white side of the cube, with each edge in the correct position. So this would be a correct cross, and this would be a wrong cross because the edges aren't in the correct position they need to go. This is important because if the edges are in the wrong position, you would have to get them in their correct spot later in the solve, which can be pretty annoying. Now to create this correct cross, we don't want to do this in 2 steps as with the beginner method, where we would start off creating a daisy on the yellow side. Instead we want to get to a solved cross in 1 step. Now this makes the cross the most intuitive step, and for some the most difficult step to master. Next up we have the longest step of the method, the first 2 layers or F2L. By creating the cross as shown before, we have created 4 empty slots in each corner of the cube. And instead of first solving the corner and then the edge on top of it, as we would do in the beginner method, in the CFOP method we would solve both these pieces, the corner and the edge, as a pair. Yo, that's cool. How do you do that? Well, there are a lot of F2L cases you can get, but essentially you start off by finding the matching corner edge pairs, turning them into a connected pair like so, and then inserting them into their correct spot. If we do this 4 times, 4 corner edge pairs in other words, we solve the first 2 layers simultaneously. F2L can be pretty intuitive, but for a lot of cases cubers will learn algorithms, which are pre-memorized sequences of moves that solve specific cases. For example, for this F2L case, where the edge is solved and the corner is flipped on top of it, I know I can just do 3 sexy moves, which is cuber slang for doing this. And that solves both pieces in the correct slot. Now we move on to the last layer, and all of the steps here consist of algorithms. First off we have orientation of the last layer, or OLL, which consists of creating a yellow face. The way you do this is by looking at the pattern of yellow pieces and doing the correct algorithm for that case. But since there are a total of 57 cases, it isn't too easy to learn algs for each case. Luckily, you can create the yellow face in 2 steps using just 9 easy algorithms, which is also called 2-look OLL. And finally there is PLL, or permutation of the last layer. In this step you turn the solved face into a solved side and you finish off the cube. PLL consists of 21 cases in total. These cases are usually described by letters. For example, this is called a J-perm, because this pattern kinda has a J shape. Whew, English, guys. The J-perm goes like this. Pretty fancy, right? Well, PLL algorithms are known to be pretty lengthy, but super satisfying and fast to finger trick. Once again, you can learn fewer algorithms to solve PLL in 2 steps, otherwise known as 2-look PLL. So now that you have a rough idea of what the method consists of, let's talk about 3 reasons why this way of solving a Rubik's Cube is dominating the world of speed cubing. You can easily transition from the beginner method to the CFOP method. We've seen that both the beginner method and the CFOP method start by creating the cross, followed by solving pieces next to the cross, which makes both methods really similar. Even an experienced CFOP solver will still apply some of the techniques from the beginner method, for example when you need to insert an edge above a solved corner. Comparing this to the Rooyen method, the second most used speed cubing method, you would need to build big blocks which are much more intuitive and difficult to explain to a total beginner. So even people who use Rooyen probably first learned CFOP before. Same goes for the third most used method, the ZZ method. This method is really similar to the CFOP method, but the user has to orient the edges of the cube before solving the first 2 layers. This is totally not intuitive and difficult to explain to even an experienced CFOP user like myself. The CFOP method is hard to beat. How would we determine what a good cube method is? Well, how about a method with the lowest amount of moves you need to solve the cube? In other words, the one with the lowest average move count. Well, if we would apply that to the top cube methods, you would think the ranking goes like this. On the first place, the CFOP method with the lowest average move count, then probably Rooyen, the second most used method, and on the third place ZZ. Well, let's take a look at the data now. Oh, it's the other way around. Huh? How can that be possible? We don't only want the lowest move count, we also want to be able to turn fast and not having to pause during the solve. Now there's a lot of reasons why CFOP is the best in this regard, but it mostly comes down to not having to think too much during a CFOP solve, because most of the solutions you do are algorithm based. And if you do an algorithm enough times, you create something called muscle memory, which makes you not having to think about the solution you're doing. In other words, it allows us to use subconscious thought, which is way faster than conscious thought can ever be. Muscle memory also allows for something called look ahead. Look ahead is when you're solving something, but already look ahead to what's coming next. This way you can go straight to the next solution without ever having to pause. And that is why you see all of these top cubers not pausing at all when they're doing their solve. And look ahead is significantly more easy using the CFOP method than it is using Rooyen. But another big issue with the Rooyen method is that the last steps usually require a lot of middle layer turns, which can be done fast, but not as fast as outer layer turns. For example, here you can see me do a Z-perm, which consists of a lot of middle layer turns, as fast as I possibly can. While this is really fast, because I am fast, it is not as fast as, for example, a UA perm, which only consists of outer layer turns, as shown right here. Even though the UA perm has more turns, it is much faster because outer layer turns can usually be performed way faster. And in the CFOP method, you can do almost everything using outer layer turns. But if there ever comes a point where Rooyen users turn just as fast as the CFOP users do, then it's over for the CFOP method, because once again, the Rooyen method has a lower average move count. Number 3. The CFOP method has a huge community. You know what else is huge? My discount code at TheCubingClubhouse.com. If you're interested in any SpeedCube related stuff, like for example, this SpeedCube, it's awesome. Go to TheCubingClubhouse.com and use discount code CUBIT for a huge discount. It saves yourself some money and it supports the channel, so I really appreciate that. By the way, I'm lying on the floor because this is the only spot that I get good lighting, because I have like this ceiling window over there. Yeah, don't worry about it. Compared to other methods, CFOP has by far the biggest community. Because of this, not only are there a lot more people to learn from, there are also much more resources like ALK sets, etc. to be found online. For Rooyen and ZZ, it is a bit more difficult to find these types of information. But let's slow down for just a second. For the last few weeks, I've been creating what I believe are the easiest tutorials to start learning the CFOP method. Check the playlist right here or the links in the description. And if you're new to cubing, grab the old Rubik's Cube laying under your bed and watch my beginner method video right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao guys.